Hello, and welcome to our weekly LinkedIn Live leadership series, Voices of Leadership. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Eastwood, your host and CEO of E equals Y. Each week, we explore the fascinating world of leadership, featuring voices from various generations, industries, backgrounds, functions, etc. A team's job is to deliver business results. The role of the leader is to empower, inspire, and enable the people and teams to deliver on those results. There's actually a repeatable formula to this, the E3 leadership code: express plus engage plus execute, powered by emotions. However, each leader's approach to applying this leadership code is really unique because there's no one way to show up. So our live sessions is really aims to showcase these diverse voices of leadership. And as we talk to our leaders, we're going to uncover what really drives them, explore their leadership style, and how they adapt. So this is absolutely an interactive dialogue. So please, in the chat, introduce yourselves. Where are you from? It's an opportunity to network with other people and ask questions. So we'll be monitoring the chat as we go and follow up with your questions and answer them live, hopefully. So let me introduce you to someone that I've known and respected for a long time, Sandy Orlando. We worked together back in the HP days, and even then it was very clear. Sandy was the kind of leader who could walk into any complexity and really make things happen. And that's something dear to my heart. I love making things happen. So she's led a ton of transformations across cybersecurity, cloud, and enterprise software. She's scaled $800 million portfolios and driven massive growth. But what I appreciate most is her ability to balance strategy with empathy. She sees the people and the product. Since then, she stepped into advisory roles and is doing some incredible work with women entrepreneurs through Astia. And she's been thinking deeply about where leadership is headed next. Today, she's the CEO and strategic advisor of her own firm, Orlando Consulting Solutions. Sandy, I am so excited you're here with us today. Welcome to the show. I gave the really quick intro. Why don't you further introduce yourself and your journey and how you got here?
Great. Well, thank you, Kathy, for having me here, and for everyone joining. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, wherever you're at in the world. Kathy mentioned we worked together way back in the HP days. What I don't think Kathy really knows is how much she's influenced my leadership style. And one of the key things when you think about what Kathy's doing with E3, but for my leadership style, is that level of emotion and heart. And I really feel like I had the engage, the execute, especially the execute, down quite well. But it's that leading from the heart and being empathetic and understanding how important each individual is in what they do and how they do it. Has been so critical to my subsequent leadership career. And I don't think I ever told you that when we were working together. And I just want to say, it has made such a material difference in my career.
Thank you. Wow, I'm very humbled by that. Sometimes I appreciate you saying that because you don't always hear it. Like you think you're doing the right things, but it's nice to get that feedback. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me tell you a little bit about my career and my background. And when you asked me to talk about that, I thought about how we look at our careers in retrospect, and it almost seems like there's a theme in what we do, when in reality, when we first step into our careers, we just have a general idea of what the world and success looks like. And then, we take different steps along the way. And so when I think about my career and how I started out, the main theme for me is around pivots. It's about having a view of what I wanted in the world, but more importantly, taking a look at each opportunity and pivoting when it makes sense. And all that's driven from, fundamentally how I grew up. I grew up in a family that first person in my family to ever go to college. I worked for loving parents, hard workers who valued learning like you would not believe. but not so much education. And so when I really wanted to take the step of trying to find a better life for myself and my future, going to school was something that I needed to really do on my own. And I worked as I went through school. I had to figure out how to balance, everything from a full-time job to trying to really develop how to grow academically. And it was interesting lessons learned very early about resilience and time management. Time management when you're 18 years old is very different when you're my age, but it's the fundamentals that go through. I majored in economics, finance degree, came back to Silicon Valley, and decided not to go get my PhD because I was too tired of working and going to school, wanted to work, and started working, in finance jobs. But if you live in Silicon Valley and you love technology, you want to be at the heart of that innovation. And so for me, my first pivot was how to, as a non-engineer, get into technology. And so it took a lot of networking, opportunistic discussions to find, and doing basically consulting freelance work in finance to get into a company that I could parlay into getting into a marketing role in technology. And then once I did that and started working in marketing, realized that I loved it, but I loved the fact that I would talk to customers and I really wanted to bring their vision to life. And I felt like to do that, I had to be in product. But again, not an engineer, not native to any particular technology space. I built career and expertise in marketing, so people didn't see me as a technologist. And to make that pivot, I went back to school, got my MBA, and then I really had to leave my comfort zone of a company that was promoting me to go to someplace new and start all over as an individual contributor and learn completely from scratch. Did that for a number of years, really began to love technology in the industry, but wanted to move into different aspects of the business. And so, fast forward, I was able to get leadership careers, grow in leadership. And I had my first choice point where I went to a company and they said, "Look, you've spotted a problem. Why don't you go run engineering?" And I said,
Mm.
absolutely not. I'm not an engineer. I've never been a development manager. I cannot believe you would even consider me for this role. And I opted to stay on my lane, and subsequently moved from that company to another company. And I had no choice. I got promoted into a role that ran engineering. And I thought back to, 2 or 3 years prior and realized there were people who believed in me more than I believed in myself, and that I could have done it, but I didn't believe I had the pedigree, the experience to do it. And that really reflected my leadership style. I was good in areas that I had competency in, but areas that I wasn't sure in, I always felt like I didn't belong. And that colored, in many cases, how I led. And it wasn't until I made 3 or more different pivots into different technology roles in different industries that I realized that the beauty about being a leader is that you have a team there to support you. And the beauty about being a leader is that it's not about you anymore. When you get to a certain stage in your career is absolutely not about you. It's about the team that you build. It's about how successful they are. It's about helping them create the art of the possible and you providing kind of in some cases, the guardrails, the resources, the support for success. And that's where, when you and I met, that leading from the heart becomes super important, because the moment you realize it's not about you anymore, it's about everybody else, you can't do anything but lead from the heart, because otherwise, in uncertain circumstances, you don't know how to give people a view of the art of the possible. So now I've taken that kind of leadership from, running very, very large businesses, to now doing things on my own. And where I'm working right now is in the intersection of transformation, primarily in product and monetizing technology innovation. But like everything else in my career, I meet great people, I spot opportunities, and I look at where I can bring impact. And so that's not only in what I do in my work, but also, as you mentioned in our introduction, I volunteer with this wonderful organization called ASTIA.
Mm-hmm.
And ASTIA's mission is to help women get access to capital. And I think one of the most shocking statistics for me is, despite the fact that women have made great strides in all aspects of business, women entrepreneurs only get 3% of the capital from venture capitalists. And it is very, very challenging to raise capital. And what ASTIA does is not only help women get access to capital, but access to advisors and people that have lived in a multitude of different technology worlds, from healthcare to environmental sustainability to consumer products to security, come in and advise these entrepreneurs to hone their ideas and then figure out how to drive to the realization. And some of these ideas, I kid you not, will fundamentally change the world. So that's where I'm at the stage in my life. And that's why I'm so happy to be here this morning to talk to you about, leadership, because it makes a difference.
I love it. You shared so much in there and so many good nuggets. And Carrie shared like the art of the possible. That's one of my favorite sayings as well. You know, it's funny when you said the 3%, that's actually up from about 10 years ago where it was only 1% of women. So the work you're doing is making a difference, but it's still slow, right? When you think about how long it takes to get women to have the funding to be successful with their innovative ideas. So what you're doing there, I'm so appreciative for because it's necessary. We can't do it alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And, ASTI is in its 25th year, and it's grown from a small organization to having its own fund and having some successful outcomes. And what I love about ASTIA is that it's a process that brings ideas into a very data driven process where you start with an idea coming in, you have the wisdom of a very knowledgeable crowd say, yeah, this idea makes sense. And then you go through a process of looking at industry operations. So by the time they get to an investor, they have the ability to really hone what makes them unique and how they're going to make money. And all the questions, if any of you have ever done fundraising, the first time you get in front of the VC, you say, I wish I had thought about that. Alstia helps entrepreneurs think about that, think about money, think about how to structure their cap tables, everything that's like a master class in, how to really bring your dreams to life.
Yeah, I love it. And correct, Kelly, she was asking the name of the company, Astia. That's exactly correct. So when you think about, you've done a lot of reflections, you've had a lot of pivots along the way. What would you advise your younger self now when you look back, and what might you have done differently?
So I think the one thing I would advise my younger self is I would believe in myself as much as other people believed in me.
Mm,
And that, one of the challenges I think for women in general, but women in technology, and then the subset of women in technology that are actually in products, so R&D or product management, subsequently gets smaller. And then as you go further up the organization, it becomes even and smaller. So oftentimes when I was younger, it was about getting competencies, and I wish I had said earlier I could do something, even though I might not have believed it, but the people around me believed it. The other thing is, whether you actually manage people or you work with people, the concept of leadership is still the same. If you have a vision or if you help people create their vision, if you get them engaged with the process of how to do it, if you look about execution and what are the steps and every place that you could add that, whether you manage people or not, helps you manage your career. And I really wish I had understood that earlier, that I didn't have to be in a management position to actually be in a leadership position. And it wasn't until I had management positions and then I went to individual contributor and I saw the impacts were very similar that it really came to me. So for people starting out in their career, believe in yourself, create your community and your sense of team, even if you don't manage one. And then when other people tap you for something, take a risk and do it. Don't think, I might not be the right person.
I love that. That is just
Kelly's right. We're often the biggest roadblocks. You're absolutely right.
I agree. It's interesting because during the boot camp that we do, one of the exercises is around, we call it the E3 leadership profile, of really sitting down and defining who you are. What are your values? What are your non negotiables? How do you like to show up? And finding your strengths and what you love. And the feedback I get most often from people when they finish that exercise is, oh, there's no mold. Like,
Yeah.
I now have more confidence of who I am is okay, right? And I need to just really call upon my strengths and show up that way and be proud of who I am.
Yeah, and that's absolutely one of the things in leadership that I think in general over the decades, the theory has switched to leading from your strengths. And I don't know if you recall coming up, and even now, people will talk about the things you could do to improve, not what your strengths are. And yes, there are things in our careers we always should improve. Um, but the beauty about having a team is you have people that have strengths in areas where you don't have, and it's about bringing that together. And I think so many managers start with what you can do to improve versus what are you really good at and how do you hone and how do you really drive that thing that's special about you. And once you can do that for individuals on your team, then they have the benefit of having a little mini one of your boot camps because they can really think about what makes me great and what makes me valuable, not only in this organization, but wherever I choose to work.
Yeah, because think about it. Like now you're starting with, oh, I feel good about things, and the confidence builds up, right? As opposed to what isn't good enough and what else, because that's when you start to have that lack of confidence or, oh, I can't take that job. And women are notorious for this, by the
Yeah.
way, Sandy, right? Looking at a
Yeah.
job opportunity and they're like, oh, I can't apply because I'm missing one of the attributes.
Yeah, and I think that the strengths is, understanding what you're natively good at. You'll be more successful in your career if you do things that you're good at and you like. You'll be more successful in navigating, your relationships with others when you really understand what you're good at and where your weakness is. And then you can create and make your weakness a strength in that you know where you need to partner with people. And so it's one of those things that I think as a leader, we spend so much time, especially when you're doing transformation projects, because it's all about change. And it's all about, for me, most of my transformation projects have been turnaround time. So it's been, very high pressure, short period of time. It's even more important to help people find out what they're good at. Because when people are under stress, if they do something they're strong at and good at, you're going to get better results for everybody, for, the individuals on the team and for the outcomes for the business.
Yeah, you're spot on. And that's one of the things that we often do is where do you want to be and what are you really good at? Right. And we definitely need to stretch and do things like
Yeah.
I don't like to do numbers. And this surprises my husband all the time. I don't like projects. It's just, and I don't like going deep in the data, but it has to be done. So I will do it, but I have to set myself up for success and do it first thing in the morning, not later. Right. So when you know what you enjoy, where you're going to show up best, you're helping yourself. And as you're saying in transformations, you're leading and making sure you help other people show up the best they can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing when I look at transformation projects, and I learned this the hard way, is if you're brought in as a woman leader to do a transformation, you're already brought in with the deck stacked against you. Because it's probably not the first time that the company has actually tried to transform.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things about transformation is you have to go slow to go fast. And because so much of transformations fails, not because you didn't have a good strategy. A lot of companies have great strategies. It's because you can't bring the team along with you, and you don't know how to harness what's best for the team. And so when you take those moments to kind of craft and create a vision of what you want to do. And remember, we did this at HP, right? When we had, a existential crisis in one of our software businesses that was impacting our services business, and it was creating enormous financial and interpersonal stress between two different divisions. Stepping back and creating that common vision about the HP way and what we really wanted to do for our customers. And we actually started out with getting 50 people in a room and creating a headline for a press release. And it was more about, how do we want our customers to feel when they use our products? And that term, how do we want somebody to feel, was like probably the scariest word that you could possibly imagine. But it was really important, because when we got to the essence of who we were and the values that we had as HP for our customers, it was magic, because we created that. We created this sense of purpose, of mission. We had an execution plan that had no money to start with, no real clear structure, and we co-created that structure as a very small team, and we got enormously good results. But if we hadn't slowed down to go fast and really say, why are we all here in the first place? And we can agree to disagree on the tactics, but we can't disagree on is the purpose. Then every time we had a disagreement, we always came back to purpose. And it just is one of those things in transformation that if you get that right, you're able to take people through enormous challenges in order to succeed. If you don't take the time to get that right on the why, then people start out with strong motivations, and then the going gets super tough, and you go like, I don't know why I'm even doing this.
Yeah, it's that purpose-driven point of view. And what I've learned is it really is for organizations, it's for teams, and it's also for individuals.
Yes.
There's days that you're like, why am I doing this? This is really hard. And when you have your why as well, then you can be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I'm back in. Let's go. And you get excited again. It really is inspirational for everyone around you.
Yeah, and that idea that, I talked to you about in the beginning, that emotional part is so important, because the other thing about transformation, and again, it's like I told you, I can write my history and my story in reverse, but when you're going through it, you don't actually know what that story's going to be or how it's going to unfold. And there's so much ambiguity and transformation that you really have to, in some cases, take a leap of faith and, stay true to your values through the process. And when you do that, you see opportunities that you might not have seen otherwise. You see people step up in a way that they might not have seen otherwise. And I remember working at one company where I came in to an industry I didn't know, to a competitive space I didn't know, to a relatively new function where now I was not only running the business, but I was also running sales. And working with a team that loved their manager, that had to be reporting to this person who really didn't know anything. Um, and and we were 25% of the company's perpetual revenue. So our CEO was constantly badgered on the street every quarter about how we were performing. And I think the one thing in working through that why is we coalesced as a team. We worked around the why. We came back and we found a niche where we could be really successful that nobody had even really seen. And within the first quarter, we were able to stop the bleeding. And then within the first year, we went from being nowhere to being number 3 in this particular market. And when I got back with my team, they were like, we started out thinking there was no way you're going to be able to lead us, that there was no way that we were going to be able to get out of this hole. And you made us think about doing things that we never thought were possible. And I love the fact that, we were able to make the impossible possible. But if you told me day one, how were we going to do that? I would have said I had absolutely no idea. But we just committed to working together and learning along the way together. And we just found out, how to be successful. And that's part of so many transformations. You know what you need to do, but the how of what you need to do isn't always obvious. And it's not always the leader who finds the answer. It's often somebody on the team that's, an individual contributor that knows the customer better than anyone, that has that clue, but you don't have visibility into that person as a leader often.
Yeah, what you're saying there is so powerful. And I've often used a phrase, think idealistically, not realistically. So when you're starting out in these big transformations, giving people the magic wand and saying, okay, here's what we have to do. But like, just think idealistically. Don't worry about the constraints. Don't worry about what's logical as the next step. And when you paint that end vision of, hey, we got to get there and not worried about the steps to start with, you really do break that cycle of doing the next logical thing and come up with some really innovative ideas.
Yeah. And I look at it not only the magic wand, but don't compromise up front. Because every organization you have to compromise on. It's just the nature of things. But if you compromise up front, then you're going to be really small. So if you have that magic wand, you don't compromise, and then you pick the places where you're going to absolutely do it, but it's not going to break you, then again, you not only get through what you need in the market, but if you're in a larger organization, you get through what you need in an organization, to make that change. And we're so indoctrinated into, this is our process, this is how we think, and we compromise before we need to compromise. And then we may have a vision, but we never can even get close to realizing it. So it's not just the magic wand, but it's like, what would you do if you didn't have to compromise? How would that look to you?
Yeah, I agree. And Carrie's quick to pick that up, right? Don't compromise up front. I totally agree. But that's a different mindset. So many leaders come in and just think, okay, we have a task. What's the next logical thing? And you are in that way compromising because you're
Yeah.
limiting that possibility, right? And so that goes back to your art of possible. What else is out there? What can we do? So, as we're talking about transformations, you talked a lot about the why, the purpose, which is the first D for me, express the end vision, where are we going, getting everyone on board. You talked a lot about the people connecting to their hearts, getting them on board. Talk to me about execution, because you can have these best visions, but if you don't deliver, not good.
Yeah. And one of the things about transformations, especially if you do large transformations, you actually get a lot of time. And if you think about some of the big business transformations or technology transformations, there's a realization at the board level that these things can't happen overnight. And so you do get a lot of time. However, sometimes when that cascades down, you think that you have a lot of time to show results and you actually don't. And
Mm,
so one of the things that I look at in execution is, how do I deliver value along the way? So
mm,
it may take 3 years to modernize my underlying technology. It may take 3 years to go from waterfall to agile. It may take 3 years to transform my quote to cash process. Um, but the expectation is always going to be, how do I know that you're on the path to those 3 years? How do I know that the money that you're getting is being spent in a way that makes sense? For the people working on the project, how do I know I'm doing the right thing and the steps along the way. So I think for me, every time I look at a big transformation project and execution, I want to break down the steps so that I know what are the metrics by which we need to be measured on. How am I going to bring that data so that we can make data-driven decisions? And you know me, I'm a numbers person, finance, economics. I ran data AI
Mhm.
organizations. I'm like a data person. I'm not an engineer, but I'm a data person. So that's super important to me. And then the other thing is, how do I think about the pivot points when I'm looking at a project so that I can get in and I can say, when do I know I'm on track? And when am I not getting enough evidence to show me that this is the right direction? And those kind of things about thinking about the data you need, the pivot points that you need, that how are you going to demonstrate to your stakeholders that you're delivering value along the way is so critical, because without doing that, you could be in a big 3-year project that can be canceled as companies get under pressure. But if you show value along the way, you're able to move forward. The other thing that's very odd that I learned early in my career about showing value along the way, I worked in an organization that was going through an absolute crash in their core market. And that crash in their core market eventually led this company to fold. But I was with the company a long time going through that series of crashes. And my part in this was very small. I did, kind of an ancillary function in it. But it came down to, if you were going to give a group money, you gave it to Sandy's team because you knew you were going to get an ROI
Mm, yep.
on that. And what happened to a lot of the people in this team, flash forward, they're CEOs of companies, they're, senior executives in their own right, they're having their own consultancy organizations, all because collectively we knew, we take money, treat it like it's our business and our
Yep.
money. How are we going to spend it? How are we going to take care of our people in a time where everything was so uncertain, so that regardless of what happened, they could grow their careers. They could see value along the way when we were asking them to take a leap of faith and we couldn't even guarantee them their jobs. So those kind of things in transformation, when I think about execution, yeah, there's a lot of financial things that people think about. There's a lot of process things, but the most important thing is, how do you show value along the way? What are the metrics that matter? And then how do you make sure the people that are executing on it, when they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, see at least a light for themselves so that they still feel invested in moving forward?
You just such great advice in all of that. And whether you realized it or not, you just really went through the E3 leadership code because it's a repeatable model, right? And if you're going to drive change, you need to have all of these pieces going throughout, and they are all interconnected, right? You can't execute if you don't have the vision expressed, you can't engage. And so it's all about balancing all of this at the same time. And as you're talking, Sandy, and obviously we've gone through a lot of these transformations together, what I love is you just helped elevate away from the minutia and the fray, right? And that's what a leader does. They come back up for air and look on where are we going, why are we going there, and are we on task to get there, and is everyone bought in? And I think too often we forget, we get so caught up in the day to day, and we forget that change takes time, it takes consistency, it takes work, right? But with that, you can really drive that change and have great results. And you are a perfect example of it, of driving change over and over again. And I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you all for your great comments and questions. It's been really, exciting to see the feedback as well.
Yeah. And I can't believe I told you this time would go fast. So we do need to wrap things up. So Sandy, thank you so much. And I do believe you have a fun project. Are you going to the schools today and bringing some
Um,
therapy?
Not today, but not only do I have my own business, but my dog, my Labrador Retriever Sophie, has a job with a great nonprofit called Furry Friends, whose motto is licking loneliness. So we go to schools, we go to assisted living centers, we occasionally go to companies, and the whole purpose of it, is to be there in times of stress for students, for older people, for employees, and give them a chance to cuddle, pet, and spend time with the dog. So not today. We have a couple of those next week, but yeah, it's a great worthwhile organization and time.
I love it. Well, I hope you'll come back because you have provided so many great nuggets for everyone. And there's a lot more topics I would love to dig into, and the different generations, and, even DEI that we can talk about. So, Sandy, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And thank you all who have joined us in the great comments. And we will see you all next week. Thanks so
Awesome.
much.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.